Really? All vows? Are you sure? That sounds too good to be true. Greetings, hero. It is I, your friendly neighborhood rabbi, and I am here today to talk to you about Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre. That's how the song starts. I'm not going to sing the rest of it. Got to go to the synagogue for that. Kol Nidre, or all vows in Aramaic, kind of like Hebrew, a little bit not, is the first rubric of the liturgy of the Erev Yom Kippur service. So it might be the first thing you hear when you go to a synagogue on the evening in the beginning of Yom Kippur. And this popular part of Yom Kippur services seems to let us get away with not keeping promises for the coming year. Seems. But before we get into how bonkers that is, I want to make sure that you know, just in case you're joining us for the first time, that this video is part of a 31-day fall Jewish holiday learning challenge. And if you learned something here today, if you like the cut of my jib, make sure you click on the first link in the show notes below to join this challenge to receive a downloadable guide to all the major Jewish holidays this year, and links to the other 30 videos of this 31-day challenge so that you can learn more about the holidays, be more aware of what's going on, and this will give you a more meaningful and ultimately more joyful experience, even on Yom Kippur. I'm so hungry. But you click on that later. We've got important stuff to talk about, and that is Kol Nidre. Kol Nidre, even though it's in the beginning of a prayer service, is not actually a prayer. It is the recitation of a legal formula whereby we ask God to consider any vows or oaths that we make in the coming year, from this Yom Kippur to next Yom Kippur, null and void. Why do we do this? And does this make Jews untrustworthy? First off, vows and oaths, specifically those vows that invoke the name of God, like I swear to that I'm going to quit smoking this year, or I swear to that I was telling the truth that time I lied to you. Whenever we invoke God's name in a promise, we make God counterparty to that promise. And if we then break that promise, not only are we making God look bad, God's got bad enough rap sometimes with some folks, but we are taking the name of God in vain, which is breaking a commandment, a pretty important one. Pretty sure it's in the top 10. Don't do that. So what we're asking God to do, if we make a promise to another person and use God's name as a part of that promise, to consider that vow not an actual binding vow, lest if we accidentally or intentionally break that promise, we're not also breaking one of the 10 commandments. If we didn't have Kol Nidre, say a slightly lesser sin of being dishonest with another person or not living up to our end of a bargain becomes a greater sin of taking the name of God in vain. Now, does this mean that Jewish people aren't good for their word and that the religious law actually lets them off the hook for that? Absolutely not. It does not mean that at all. My colleague, Rabbi Ruth Adar, also known as the Coffee Shop Rabbi, has a couple of important teachings on this point. First off, Kol Nidre is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. And saying it doesn't make keeping a promise to another person any less important. We are expected that our yes be yes, our no be no, and our promises be kept. This just keeps God's complicity out of it if we mess up. And nonetheless, Jewish tradition and law requires us that we be true to our word, whether we're dealing with other Jews or non-Jews or anybody else, no matter what you may have heard. In fact, the very existence of this thing, and it's being read by people who don't understand it and don't understand where it's coming from, has been used against us at various anti-Semitic discrimination waves throughout history. Talking of which, another point that Rabbi Adar makes is that this rubric of service, which has been with us for hundreds and hundreds of years, really surged in popularity at times whether under Christian or Muslim rule, Jews were forcibly converted to another religion. They were made to swear to God that they disavowed being Jewish and they adopted another religion on pain of death. And so at these dark phases of our history, Jews who felt terribly guilty going into Yom Kippur, having made an oath that they detested in order to save their own lives and the lives of their families, possibly their towns, were given strength and security by this statement of Kol Nidre that God wouldn't hold it against them for something that they had to do to save their own lives. Because as we see again and again in the Torah and the Jewish tradition, staying alive is paramount and supersedes almost every other commandment on the books. One more practical point about Kol Nidre is that if you want to hear it, you got to get to synagogue before dark. In traditional communities, the Erev Yom Kippur service, that is the service that starts in the beginning of Yom Kippur, starts before dark because Kol Nidre optimally should not be said after dark. The reason for this is that, again, it's not a prayer, it is a form of legal testimony, and in the Jewish tradition, legal testimony should not be given on Shabbat or a holiday that's very much like Shabbat. And so you go to the synagogue a little bit before dark, they say Kol Nidre, It's usually said 3 times with a beautiful melody to it, and then the community lights candles and gets on with the services. But to be clear, this is actually something that many people look forward to, not because of its legalistic nature, but because it is the kickoff of the holiest day of the year, and it's often set to beautiful music. And if you want to hear Kol Nidre, make sure you get to the synagogue before it gets dark this Yom Kippur. Or, pretty much any Yom Kippur. Not last Yom Kippur. Too late. Now I'm just rambling. Hero, thank you for watching this video about Kol Nidre, a beautiful yet legalistic, but sometimes historically life-savingly necessary part of the Yom Kippur service, and I'm glad to share it with you as a part of this 31-day challenge. If you're not in the challenge, make sure you click on the first link in the show notes below, or slap that handy-dandy orange square down there. You'll get your guide to the holidays, you'll get links to all 31 of these lessons. Next time we'll go through all the other aspects of prayer that are unique to Yom Kippur, and until then, hero, peace. With jib cut? Really? That sounds too good to be true. Now I'm just rambling.